Hello, everyone. Hope you all are doing great. First of all, thank you for tuning in with Recro. Myself, Ankita. I'm working as a software development engineer at Swiggy and also a part of Recro, which is a developer focused organization where we are trying our level best every day to connect the talented developers with the fast growing startups like Dunzo, CureFit, Swiggy, Uran, and a lot more similar startups. Today's webinar is going to be on mastering CSS to build intuitive UIs. And today with us, we have one of our favorite speakers today, Faisal Rashid. I don't know if people who attended Faisal's last session are still there or not. If you are, you know that he gave the CSS session like once before also, and it's just a continuation of that. About Faisal, so he is a software engineer who's working as a full stack web developer at DealerSocket, and he comes with 3.5 years of experience in programming. He also works as a freelancer, mobile app, and website developer. And in addition to web development, he has a keen eye for design. He has built a number of websites and mobile applications where he tries to implement the newest technologies that keep popping in the programming world while paying real attention to the design details. And he also likes to build code libraries in a bit to do his bit in the programming community. Faisal, please take it over from here.
Hey, thanks a lot, Ankita, and thanks for those kind words. So I don't have much to say about my introduction other than what Ankita already said. Just that I work at DealerSocket. I am just a tech enthusiast like most of you guys. And today, what we'll be trying to do is, if this is your second session in this series, I hope this is a series. Then this should be a breeze for you. Because we are continuing from where we left off. If it isn't, that's fine too, because we won't be, the concepts that we have picked up will be explained from scratch. So it shouldn't be difficult for you to grasp. And today, what we will be trying to do is we'll be trying to get to a level in CSS where we can get comfortable designing layouts, right? Not just elements of the layout, but the whole layout in itself. So the theme today is that we want to build a web page layout completely. So I guess we can dive in. Information for you guys. I will be switching. I have two screens in front of me, so if I'm not looking at the camera, that means I'm looking at my other screen. So I hope that's fine with all of you guys. All right, so I'll be sharing my screen. If you guys don't see it, just raise a concern in the chat. So what is this is mastering CSS to build intuitive UIs. Like I said, it's in the title. We're trying to build UIs, not just elements of the UI. And this is a simple CSS script where Bruce Banner can transition into the Hulk and becomes green. This will all make sense after the webinar. If you guys don't understand what transition is, what's happening here, this is just a fun little joke. So going next. Okay, what are we going to learn today? We are going to deep dive into Flexbox. Now, mind you, it won't be 100% deep dive into Flexbox because Flexbox is vast, but we'll be trying to cover most of it so that you guys can actually use it in your projects and all. And then we will be introducing ourselves to CSS Grid. So CSS Grid is an improvement over Flexbox, and it is the pinnacle of CSS technology. And CSS Variables, what are they and why you should care? We'll be talking about animations and transitions in CSS. Then after that, we will be doing a demo. And as a footnote, we will briefly look at the state of CSS currently. So going forward, I just want to get it out of the way that we will not be mastering CSS today. I don't think anyone has ever mastered CSS, except the people who actually build CSS, I guess. So CSS is very vast, and It can give you a headache. It gives me a headache still, but we will be trying to make sense of most of the high-level concepts of CSS today. So diving in quickly, let's talk about Flexbox. What is Flexbox? Okay, as in the title, everything is Flexbox, or at least should be. So when you design layouts in your projects that you work on in Office or for yourself, I assume that some of you use Bootstrap and some of you use, let's say, Material UI, any technology that allows you to create a structure you must use. So when you use those frameworks, they internally use Flex to actually get your layouts right. Okay, so even though you may not know Flex, but all of you, if you have worked with CSS, have used Flex. So let's try to make sense of that. What is Flex? Flex is a technology in CSS, a property in CSS, display property in CSS that allows you to unidirectionally position elements. What that means is it allows you to put elements, page elements, HTML elements on a line, be it a vertical line or a horizontal line. How that helps us is because CSS provides you tools to give you a lot of control over positioning of those elements, the spacing, the alignment, how you justify those elements. And it is extremely useful when you're building page layouts because it gives you granular control over your layouts or how your top level top level components are in plain HTML, how your top level HTML elements are structured. So this gives you a lot of control over that, the Flexbox that is. And let's dive in. Let's try to make sense of it. So I'm gonna open up my browser and as well as document. Hope you guys can see it. So this presentation, this webinar is going to be a lot of code and very little presentation. I hope everyone is fine with that. I would be. So this is, I hope everyone can see this, the font that is. If you can't, please raise a concern in the chat. For now, I'm assuming that this is visible. So as you can see, this is a VS Code window, and I'm live sharing this window here. As you can see, nothing is in the document, so you cannot see anything. Just to make you believe that this is in fact the same window, I will write hello world because that's what people do. So you can see hello world here. So we're good. What we are going to demo now is how Flexbox works. Okay, so if you guys remember from my previous session, there are lots of ways to add styles to your document, and I'm not going to open a separate file. I'm going to do it in this file itself because there is just not enough space for me to create a separate file, but you can do this in a separate file, add styles in a separate file here. So what we are going to do is we're going to try to make sense of Flex. So, sorry. I'm going to give this a class of Flex container. And I am going to put some elements inside this container. So I'm going to say if dot class, class item 1 6. That was just some plugin that I'm using to generate this HTML because I don't want to write that much HTML. I'm going to name these 3, 4, 5, and 6. And in here, I'm going to say this is item 1. Two, 4, 5, and 6. Save this as expected. We can see the 6 items here. Right now there is no flex. It's just the name of this is flex container. I haven't added any flex to it or anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some style. So to the flex container to begin with, I'm going to say, hey, your display should be flex. This is a Flexbox. Now we are working with Flexbox. When some HTML elements display property is set to flex, this is now a Flexbox. So when I save this, you'll notice a change. As you can see before, since each of these is a block level element, div, every division is a block level element, that means it takes the whole width that's available to it. You were seeing everything one are stacked above one another. But now, as soon as I change the property to flex, I can see that they are side by side. This is because flex has some default properties. So when you have flex, and like I said, it's a unidirectional representation of HTML elements. The unidirectional here is horizontal. So all the elements that are inside Flexbox are now horizontally placed. In Flex terms, we call them that this is now a row of elements. If I want to change it to column, I would say Flex direction column. Now, if I save this, you would notice that they are again unidirectionally placed, but now in a vertical line. So that's because flex direction is by default row, and now it has been changed to column. Okay. All right. So now what we're trying to do is, now this is flex is not just that. So if I change it back, this is just default, whatever default properties were applied to it, it applied to these elements. Now to distinguish what else flex can do, I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna say I'm gonna give all of these items a height of, let's say, this one I have 30 pixels. I know this is going to take a little bit of time. And 6. And this I will make 20. Let's make this 40, 60, 80, and there are some properties that I want to apply to all of these elements. So for that, I will make use of the child selector. So whatever div is directly inside flex container, I want its background color to be, let's say, aqua 6. If you notice something that now all of these elements have different heights, but they are placed on a single line still. Okay, they have, so their alignment in CSS terms is baseline right now. Now this is where now the power of flex will come in. Now I can set the width, the position, the vertical position, that in this case would be alignment, as per as I want. So let's say I want to align items center. Save this, you will notice that it aligned all those items centrally, where everything is in the middle. If you notice, I could say I could align them in many ways. I could stretch, I could initial. That it's up to me. So stretch won't work because I don't have, these are not growing, but I can align them as I want. I have center, I have flex end, I have baseline. So if I do flex end, everything will be stretched to the bottom. Similarly, I can align them. Let's for now keep it as it is. Let's say center, and they will be aligned centrally. That's not it though. What I want is, let's say I have these 6 items, and you would notice I haven't given any of these a width. If none of these has a width, it will obviously take whatever width it needs, right? But what I want to do is, I want each of these to have some basic width, right? For that, I would use a property called flex basis, and I will say, you know what, all of you should have a basic width of 200 pixels, which in this case is too much, so let's go 100, right? 100 pixel width. Now, the power of Flex really comes in when you run out of width sometimes, and that I will demonstrate in a bit. Before that, I forgot to mention one of the most important properties of Flex, that is Flex direction. I did do this, but I forgot one more. So you could do column, which we saw, you could do row, you could do row reverse, which is really important to understand. Now it will take the direction from right to left. But notice that even though our elements are item 1 comes first, in this case it comes last. So Flex is able to orchestrate these elements to position them as and how we want. And another thing. Now, let's say right now I have a lot of width. All right, I have these 100 pixels is enough to fit all my Flex items. Let's say I somehow double the items. Let me make this row again. Let's say I have now, right, now I have a lot of items. You would notice that even though I had put a flex basis of 100 pixels, this is not 100 pixels, right? It fit whatever items I put in, it fit them in a single row, as you can see here. It didn't take into account that I had put, it did take into account flex basis, but flex is, it puts everything on a single line unless and until you don't want it to. For that, let's say I want to keep it at 100, but if more items come in, I want to break the line. So that property is called flex wrap. So it by default is wrap. That it by default is no wrap. That means you don't wrap the line to the next one. If I change it to wrap, save this, you would notice that as soon as it ran out of the width, it put the next item in the next line. So this is another very important property of flex wrap. You have a shorthand property for both of these. No, it's called flex flow. It takes first flex direction and it takes second as the flex wrap. So if I get rid of these two, save this, won't make a difference. So this is the shorthand for these two. All right. So that's enough about the container. What about the items, the children of the flex? They also have some, we also have some control over children, right? They also have some flex properties. For example, first let's get to, we don't need you. Now we are better. And so the children also have some properties, right? For example, I aligned this centrally. I don't want this one to be aligned centrally. Okay, what I want to do is I want item 1 to be at the base. Okay, so I could say, I hope this works. I say align self baseline. Sorry, not baseline. Flex end. Let me save this. If you would notice that item 1 now is at the bottom. That is flex end. Also, something to note here that we don't say bottom and top in flex, we say flex start and flex end, because if you remember, I kept the, when I change, if I change direction to row reverse, now the flex start isn't to the right. Sorry, flex start is no longer to the left, it's to the right, and flex end is here. So in flex, we talk in terms of flex start and flex end to make it more understandable in that regard. So let's get rid of this. Another thing that we have in Flex is for these items is something called Flex Grow. Flex Basis you already saw. Flex Grow is something that allows an element, an item, to pick up all the available space in relation to how its siblings have their Flex Grow. What that means is this. Let's say I change this is, by the way, these styles are applying to all the elements that are in here. Let's say I change this flex grow to 1. You would notice that everything stretched to the available space. right? The reason it happened is that when I applied this to everyone, it applied to item 1, item 2, item 3, and all of these. And what it told these items is that, hey, whatever available space is there, we will take one proportion of it, right? It will be equally distributed between us. To make sense of this, what I mean by that, let's say I go to item 3 and I tell it, you know what, your flex growth should be 2. Due to specificity, this style won't apply until I do something like this. If you guys want to know more about specificity, please read my other, please view that link that Ankita shared. I think Sana shared. So if you notice that, let me get rid of flex spaces for a second. Would notice that now item 3 is twice as big as the rest of the items. That's because I told it everything has a flex grow of 1. That means one proportion of whatever the free space has been divided to, but this has 2. That means it should be twice as big as the rest of them. If I change this to 3, it'll be twice as big as the rest of them. Things like that. That is the control that we're talking about, that flex gives you. Now let me get rid of the flex grow. Let's get rid of it for a second. Another thing that we can do with flex is justify content. And let's also get rid of whatever we did here, line self. We have everything on the same line now. Cool. So what we're going to do is, I will take all the flex questions. I see there are a lot of them in the chat once we're done with flex here. Yeah, so I will get to each one of those, probably. So now what we're going to do is we are going to use something called justify. So justify content, it justifies on the flex axis. Okay. So flex axis in this case is this horizontal line that's invisible, but that's your flex axis. If this were column, it would be the vertical line. So justify content allows you to justify your items, place your items on the horizontal line. Let's say its default is flex start. Let's say I want to justify content on flex end. If I save this, you would notice that everything went to the right, to the flex end. Similarly, something that I use a lot is center. Now everything is in the center. There are a lot of properties available, space around that distributes them equally on the axis, and space between that places the first item on the flex start and last item in flex end, and everything else is distributed equally. So let's say space between, right? You guys can, I hope this is distinguishable, right? As you can see, this is right at flush at the start, and this is flush at the end, and whatever is left is distributed equally on the horizontal axis. So this is the something to help you understand the power of flex. We could even look at we did do a lot of too much of row. Let's go call. Let's say this. So why is it here centrally? It's because we aligned item center. So now something to understand here is that align items works on the axis that is perpendicular to the flex axis, and justify content works on the axis that on the flex axis itself. So when we change it to column, the vertical axis is what justify content will be affecting. And when we change this to, and similarly align items no longer works on the vertical axis, but the horizontal axis, as you can see here. So if we change this to flex start, you would notice came to the start. Similarly, if we change this to flex start, oh, I did nothing because I have a basis. So now the flex base, if you saw in the previous one, flex basis affected the width of the elements. Now it just affects the height because now my flex direction is changed. So if I change this to 50, not 500. No, not that. You would see that everything is now 50. Okay, so that's almost all of Flex. But the question still is, what's the point? Why? What, how does it help me? So personally speaking, we use a lot, like I said, we use a lot of Flex, right? I personally use it. Usually when I have to put things on a line, right? In my previous session, I explained how you can create a menu out of it, right? If we go to these and get rid of this and give everything and change this to row, okay. Oh, my bad. So this is not something that I had to do. Oh, all right. I save this. Now let's say I have to create a menu, and I could use CSS to do that, Flex to do that. Right now, say these are like that. All I have to do is I have to tell it, you know what, Flex Grow 1, and my menu is ready. Let's say I have to put the menu in the center. I could get rid of Flex Grow, and I could just tell it, you know what, justify content center. Now my menu is centrally placed. Similarly, now if I keep adding items to it, right, without Flex, I would have to constantly keep updating the CSS. I would have to keep updating the width of the Flex of my menu. But when I use Flex, it automatically adjusts, right? If I if I change this back to Flex Grow and I get rid of the content, you would see that as and when I keep adding items to it or deleting items from this, it doesn't matter. My items are still placed as in how I want them. So Flex helps a lot in placing your, designing your layouts, right? That is about it with Flex. I see there are a lot of questions. I will try to answer as much of them as possible. It's okay, right, Ankita? I could take these questions now.
Okay, so the question is, can I fix position of an element using flex?
Fix position. If you mean like we do with position fixed, then I would suggest you use position fixed. Flex is more like keeping, so the word flex comes from flexible. It's keeping your UIs flexible. It's keeping your UIs ready for change. So we have tricks to, let's say I want to set this item one in the left hand side only and rest of it to the right. We have tricks to do that, but flex won't be something that you would be using to do that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Next question is, can we add a PNG picture into a flex item?
Flex items can be anything. Yes, absolutely. We can add a PNG inside of flex. So right now this is a div with a text. It could be a paragraph, it could be a span, it could be anything. Right? Maybe in the demo you'll get more understanding of it. That yes, we can add PNGs to Flex. There is just no problem with it, as long as it's an HTML element.
I think the main concern here is that the size of the PNG image.
Yeah, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. See, okay, uh, like you saw here, right? I changed the heights of everything. Right? If I kept everything with different heights, but I was still able to orchestrate that. So when you add an image or something, the problem will be size, but you can orchestrate the size as in how you want it to be. Flex can help you put it on a line or something if you want that.
Next question we have is, can and should Flexbox be used as an alternative to grid layout?
Can we take that question after we're done introducing grid?
Yeah.
You will answer that question yourself. I think you will remove that yourself, Abhijit. So when we do grid, you will absolutely be able to answer that question yourself.
Okay, so I'd skip the other question also, which is around grid only. So taking next question up, what is the difference between align items and align content is in a Flexbox container?
Okay, so align content, so align items affect the items itself, right? How do you want to align the items? Align content is something that will affect the flex box in itself, right? So align content you won't be using much in flex. You will be using a lot of in grid, right? So if your flex container is bigger than what the content you put in there, you can use align content to align it as in how you want.
I think they'll understand more it with the demo. I think if you could just change the height.
I would love to give a demo while we do grid because align content is a big part of it. I wouldn't mind.
Great. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Difference between flex container and
Oh,
flex container, which is accessing the div.
oh, okay. All right, cool. So I think the question is around these. So
Yes.
this selector, this flex container, selects this div for this flex container. And when I say flex container, this is the child selector. It will select the div, each div inside. What we mean by that is this. Let's say I give this a border of solid 1px red. You would notice that each item has a solid 1px red border. So it selects every div that is the direct child of flex container. And if I instead give it to this flex container, save this, the border is just on the container. I hope that explains it.
Okay, so Faisal, can you explain? Okay, when you align items horizontally, individual heights assigned to item 1, etc., are not considered.
When you align items horizontally, individual heights assigned to item 1 were not considered. They were considered, if I'm not wrong. We changed, if you look at this, each of these had heights. And when we aligned items to center, each of the height was considered. I don't understand the question. Is there something else you want to ask Abhijit? Because
Abhijit, you can raise your hand if you want to speak up and explain further and discuss further. Yeah, hi
Hey
Abhijit,
Abhijit.
please
Yeah,
go.
hi. So what I wanted to ask is not in the align items, but in the flex flow part, when you when you did it like column wrap in that situation.
Okay, so you're saying that needs to column wrap, the heights not considered. Uh, no, they were not. The reason they were not considered is because, okay, that's actually a good question. It's because you remember we said wrap. So when you're building HTML components, HTML components, you would know that height is always a problem, right? Unless and until you specify height yourself, it always takes whatever is available to it, right? So since I said flex basis 50px, it just took 50px and rest of it uh, kind of shrunk. So something to get over that is flex shrink 0. I save this now. Somehow it's not applying to it. Um, right, I see there is a problem. Yeah, flex basis was the problem. So when I put flex basis, it took this width and not whatever we provided. And since, like I said, in case of columns, the flex basis applies to height. So when we put flex basis to 50 pixels, it's the one that overrid it. It was the reason that it was overridden. And when we remove the flex basis, it will take whatever heights that you provide to the container. Does that answer your question?
Okay, so in case of item 3 class, like its specificity is more than the flex container, like in which we have considered flex basis. So in
Yes.
that case, height of that should be respected. Is that correct?
No. So specificity only applies to the same property. Although flex basis and height in this case would have affected the same property, but they are not the same property. So that's the reason that this height was not respected.
Okay, yeah, understood.
Cool.
I hope
Right.
it's answered, Abhijit.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, moving on. Next,
Please move.
next up we have grid. So your questions about grid, and now I'm really nervous about grid. Everyone is so excited about grid. Cool. So what is grid? So grid is, we saw one unidirectional positioning of data elements, right? Now we'll look at bidirectional positioning of elements. Mind you, this is just an introduction of grid. If I'm being fully honest, I don't know grid myself 100% because it is so vast. But it's so vast because it gives you 100% control over your elements, how they are positioned. So it's bidirectional position of elements both on X and Y axis. It gives you more granular control, and yeah, you can build very complex layouts using grid. Enough talk. Let's jump into it. Right? Okay. So I'm gonna now create another file here called HTML. And I'm gonna give it HTML5, and here let's call it grid, and let's see if I can get it loaded. Cool, we have it. We have grid now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to help you. We're going to try to create a layout using grid, and let's do that. I'm going to borrow some code from this because I think we don't have enough time to write the whole thing. I'm going to call it grid container, and item 1, item 6. With 7, 8, and 9. Cool. So, okay, again, start. Right, if I save this, you would see that these are placed. I think someone had a question in the chat. What's the difference between a block level element and an inline element? A div is a block level element, which an element that takes the whole width that is provided to it. Right. If I inspect this, you would notice that item 1 is taking whole width. Right. So these are block level elements. Okay. So far, so good. What I want to do is I want to have this grid container, and I want to say display line grid. That's it, we're done. That did absolutely nothing. That is because grid is it's more polite than flex. Unless and until you wanted to do something, it generally doesn't do it. So what is how do we build this grid now? Okay, you have to understand two things. Okay, so grid is comprised of rows and columns. So let's consider a table, right? A table has rows and columns. Grid is similar to that, but more flexible. So in order to specify the grid, you have to specify what rows, how many rows, what should be the width of a row, so what should be the height of a row, and what should be the width of a column. You have to specify all those things in order to get these items positioned correctly. And then once you're done doing that, you will also have to make sure that all of these items are placed correctly. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first define in my grid what the columns are going to look like. Okay. So it's called grid template column. What I want to do is I want 3 columns. I want each column to have a width of 300 pixels. So I would say, no, 300 is too much. 200 pixel, 200 pixel, and 200 pixel. When I say that and save it, you would notice that now I have 200 pixel columns. Just to make it a little interesting, and the container div, every div should have a border of solid 1px purple. Okay. Okay. Now you notice that why do I have 12 elements? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 6. No, shouldn't be. Okay, now I have 9 elements. Now I have defined that I should have 3 columns. It would put everything on those 3 columns, and it would assume that the row to be the height of whatever fits. Okay, but I actually don't want that. What I want is now I will define the rows. I would say grid template rows to be, let's say, 150 pixels, 150 pixels, and 150 pixels. Okay, all right. So this is the grid. See how simple it is. But this is not actually it. I could get this using a flex also if I wanted to. So what's so great about grid? The thing great about grid is that let's say I have another element here. Okay, I have item 10, and I call this item 10. Right. Now what I want is, you notice that it just takes whatever is provided to it because my rows and columns only accommodate 9 different elements. So the problem here is that what I want to do is I want 3 at the top and 3 below those and 4 below that. Now that is something that would be difficult to accomplish if you have everything in the same container. You could have them in different containers and get that done, but right now it seems a little tricky. And to get that done, you have to understand that we can no longer have 3 columns, right? Let's say I want 3 at the top and 4 at the bottom. That means that I would need to have 3 columns here and 4 columns here, but that's not how grid works. So what I would do is I would say, you know what? I want to have 12 columns. Okay. Those 12 columns, then what does that mean? When I say 12 columns, I want item 1 to accommodate 3 columns, item 2, 3, item 3 also 3, same for 4, 5, and 6. Sorry, 4 columns each. And when I get to 7, 8, 9, 7, 8, 9, 10, I want them to accommodate just 3 columns. Okay, so this is a little over the top for now. Just bear with me, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it that, hey, I want a not 200 pixels anymore since this is 600 pixels. Let's say I want a 50 px column, but I want in total 12 of those. So grid gives us something to do that. It's called repeat. I would say repeat 12. 50 pixel. Now I have 50 pixel columns and I have 12 of those. Similarly, I want rows to be the same, 3. I don't want to do anything with the rows. If I save this, now you see, since I have just 10 elements, everything fits into those 10 columns. I don't even need the rest of it. So now I need a way to tell it, hey, these elements you see from 1 to 6 should occupy 3 columns, not just 1. So to do that, I would now tell it, say, now everything, every div that's inside, let's say grid column span 3. Okay, these are grid terms. Okay, when I say span 3, not 4, I say span 4, it will span for 4 columns. Save this, I still have a problem. I don't know where to put this, right? So what I would do is I would create another selector here, grid container. I don't need this. For item 7, item 8, item 9, and item 10, I want it to be its columns, it should occupy 3 columns. Okay. With this, and oh, this is again more specific. Okay, I keep forgetting specificity. So what's happening here is that uh, these are taking this style instead of this because this is more specific. Now it shouldn't be. If I reload this, nothing happens for some reason. There is no dash. I really wish this had an open chat, open voice chat, so that someone could tell me, "Hey man, what's wrong with you?" Okay, cool. Now, if you notice that these now occupy the bottom 4. Mind you, this could be a very difficult style to get right if you are not working with column, if you are not working with grid, but you could get done with flex. Now, there is something that you cannot get done with flex, or if you want to get it done, it will be really, really difficult. I want this item 3 to occupy 3 and 6. Now, that would be something difficult. Let me get rid of this 6. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want this item 3 to be in both of these. So for that, what I will do is if item 3 grid row, I would say, you know what, span 2, knock yourself out. Now, this is where the power of grid really starts to kick in. You'll notice that now this item 3 is occupying 2 rows, and that is something that grid allows you to do. There's a lot more that grid does, a lot more, right? But it's just not, we don't have enough time to talk about it. Now, to answer some of the questions that came up before, right? For example, sorry, when you should use flex and when you should use grid, it's your choice. If you're building a complex layout, because grid can get really complex. This is not even like 10% of the properties that grid provides you. Okay. So for example, let me say gap of 20 pixels. And if I save this, now everything has a gap. So grid provides you a lot of properties, a lot of control over your UI. And if you really want to go through all these complexities, then yeah, grid is your friend. But if you're really considering that whether I should use flex or grid in that in any situation, you probably should use flex because otherwise you wouldn't have asked yourself that question. Does that make sense? Okay, which one do you prefer? I prefer flex when it makes sense, and grid. Uh, to be very honest, I haven't used grid a lot in a couple of places, maybe because it mainly helps you to create layouts. So flex also helps to do that, but if your layout is really complicated, you could use grid.
Faisal, I've seen, like most of the cases, I also use Flex only. But sometimes when there are more complex UI that I have to build, like I also use Grid for that. Uh, yeah.
Yes.
And like in Grid, like you
Yeah.
have to do a lot of things also. I mean, like Flex is more
Yeah.
like in a way simpler than Grid.
Flex is a lot
Yeah,
straightforward. Yes, I agree
yeah.
completely. Oh, there was a question last time, right? Align items and align content. I see center. I expected this to go to center, but it does not. Why not? Oh, it was justify content. Sorry. It went to center. So content usually applies to the whole item rather than the uh, particular flex item.
Yeah,
Does that make
yeah,
sense?
that's exactly what it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay,
let's take the
cool.
rest of the
Do we
questions.
have any more? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, sure.
Okay, can I use should yeah, this is answered I guess. Can and should I use Flexbox as an alternative to grid layout?
Yes,
And
you
yeah,
can.
please continue.
So you can use Flex as an alternative to Grid if it makes sense. But let's say you want to build such a layout, right? Cannot do it with Flex. You will have to create separate containers for most of these, right? You'll have this item one, two, three, well, one, two, four, and five will have to go into its own container, and then item three and these four combined will be in their own container, and then item five, item seven, eight, nine, and 10 will be in their own container. So you'll have to do something like that.
Yeah, and grid gives us more control over the contents that we want to show.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, I think that this answers the next question also. Flex versus grid, which is more powerful?
Oh, absolutely. Grid is more powerful. Grid can do all things Flex does. Actually, it cannot do all things. Flex is more flexible. Grid isn't. Grid is more rigid. What does that mean? That means that if you notice here that I cannot work with 11th item, this grid will break for that. It won't accommodate the 11th item unless and until I have some really powerful configuration set up here. I have auto flow and all those things set up very well. It won't be able to accommodate the 10th item. But Flex, you saw, right? As and when we kept adding items, it kept accommodating them. So Flex is more flexible. Grid is usually used for more rigid cases.
But Faisal,
Hope that
can we
answers the
have
question.
can we make all this, like we can make all this CSS configurable also, no? In grid, like we can we can calculate the rows, number of rows that we have to apply in the grid, and the grid column, the span, how what it should be, right?
Yes. We can, but when the point of calculating things comes, you have to take a little bit of help from JavaScript. So that breaks not breaks CSS, but when we're talking about pure CSS, grid is rigid. When we're talking about CSS with JavaScript, everything is flexible.
Okay, so next question that we have is, can we make cell for item number 5 disappear, something like border none? Just this, yeah.
What can item 5?
Can we make the cell for item
Sure.
number 5 disappear?
We can. Okay, so I can remove its border or something. That is fine. But there is another concept that would come in more handy, which I will explain next. But for now, yeah, I can just say something like item 5 border, right? And there it goes. Gone. It's really up to you. But yeah, the point we will experience in the demo is that your grid can have empty cells as well, which is not possible in this case, but we will make it possible in the demo.
Okay, so next is we have is question from Arvind, but I feel okay. I think this is not a complete question. This should be a combination of these two questions. Arvind, if you like, you can raise your hand and speak up so that you can explain the whole question. Great. Okay, deleted it. Arvind, would you like to speak up? Let's take another question till then. Okay, so it is
Mhm.
flex items increase their height based on their content. How to make all the flex items to the same height, and how do we make sure that no content is removed?
Okay, flex. We can make flex items the same height if we want. See, Flex will tinker with your height as per Flex rules if you are working with a column Flex direction. If you're working with horizontal flex direction, it's completely up to you how you want to keep the height of your container, right? So that I'm guessing this is a question for flex rows. In case of flex rows, height is completely up to you. You want to keep it same, you want to keep it different, it's completely up to you. Flex won't interfere, flex row at least won't interfere with the heights of your elements.
Okay, so next we have is Faisal. Can you explain when shall we use flex and when grid against and both can be used for the same purpose? If you can explain with example or something, then it's much helpful.
Absolutely. Please stay tuned. We have an example coming.
Okay, so I won't move this question to answered. And now we
Yeah.
have an Arvind. Arvind, I'm handing over the mic. Arvind? Hi, Arvind.
Hey, Alvin, you are not audible.
Uh, Arvind, I'll withdraw the mic and you can raise your hand again.
I think we have a question from Arvind in the chat about screen
Yeah.
sizes. As correctly pointed out by Ayub, you can use Flex with media queries, right? So if you want different layout for different screen sizes, just use media queries. If you want it to have just one column and the rest of it should be in rows, you can do that. It's completely up to
Actually, his
you.
question
You will
is
have.
that which makes more sense here, grid or flex?
Oh, we had another one from Arvind in chat, but that's fine. In this case, grid makes a lot more sense. So that's 100%. Yeah, it would be very uncommon that you would have to build something like this, but grid is telling you if you have to, you can.
Then we have another question and that is, can we place the content center horizontally and vertically using CSS Grid, similar to Flexbox?
Absolutely, you can. So let's say justify. So let's say align items. I'm not so sure. I haven't done this in a long time, but yes, you can. But it applies, you have to understand that it applies to your whole content. That's why you see the borders are dead. The reason being that it now puts everything in the center without any regard for the height. All of these items are now centrally aligned, right? The only problem is that we lost the height. So if you need to align something that's inside the container, I would suggest that you align that, you give the alignment responsibility to the inner element itself. But grid does allow you to do that. But if you're working with what we were working in a bit, it kind of breaks it in this way.
Okay, so we don't have any more questions, just one from Ayub, which you'll be like demonstrating.
Yes, sure, absolutely. Cool. We're also already running almost out of time, so I'll try to speed things along a little. And like I said, if this makes you appreciate grid, there's a lot to be learned still. Okay, we'll be learning a little bit more about grid in the demo, so stay tuned. Okay, cool. So next up we have CSS variables and why you should care. So CSS variables are your way of saying letting you not repeat code. Okay, so CSS variables are custom CSS properties, as you can see here, that store some values. Value can be anything. Okay, can be absolutely anything. So what do they help me do? They help you avoid code repetition. Okay, so many of you must know dry principle, do not repeat yourself. It applies to all programming languages, and in this case let's apply it to CSS too, right? So you should not repeat your code no matter what, because repeating code means that if that code changes, you have to change it in more than one place. So CSS variables allow you to not repeat code if you don't have to. They make your CSS more readable. Some of you must be wondering what does that even mean, but we'll see what it means. And your styles more flexible. So styles more flexible because since you don't have much repeated code, your styles become more flexible. You change it in one place, it changes it in all the places where it's being referenced. So that's your CSS variables. Now, how do I work with CSS variables? Okay, so let's work with this. Let's open up a new one. Say, okay, let's create a new file. Call it variables. Okay, cool. All right. In this one, I am going to do the same thing. I'm gonna create an HTML5 page, and I'm gonna add a header. Okay, cool. So CSS variables, like I said in the presentation, are nothing but custom properties. CSS properties. Opens it up. Yes, that did open it up. Cool. So what does that mean? Let's say I have a style. I have a box, a div, and that div is gonna have a height of 200 pixels, a width of 200 pixels, and a background color of red. Okay, save. Now I have this div. What I want to do is that I want to store this, I want to create another div that has the same height and same width as this div. What I will have to do is, let's say I give this a class of first div, and I will do this as second div. Okay, and now the second div should have the same height and width. The color should be blue. So this should create it no problem. Problem is that now I'm repeating code. I've started repeating it. Some could argue that why not create a separate class? I don't want to do that, but I'm still repeating code. Something that could help me with that is CSS variables. So what are variables? This is a keyword root. This means that this variable will be available everywhere throughout the document. And what I'm saying is that, hey, you know what? The height should be 200 pixels, or let's call it standard height, so that it's not confusing. And the standard width should be 200 pixels. So when I save this, that won't do anything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say variable standard height and variable standard width. Okay. So these this is the syntax. So these dashes before that represents that this is a variable, a custom property, and this var method that's provided in CSS is something that allows you to access a property. If I save this, you'll notice nothing changed. Okay, they still, I have 200 pixels. Now if I want to somehow change this to 400 pixels, 300 and 300, and save this, see that both of these are bigger, and I had to make the change in just one place. Now, the point that I'm trying to make is that these storing of these variables can be helpful, really, really helpful, because let's say when the let's say I want to write a media query, right? And in the media query, I want no div to be more than 200 pixels, right? So in the media query, I could do the same thing, right? Media, oh my God. like that, I could reset these. Say now the root should be 100 pixels wide. Although I haven't done this ever, I'm not sure if this is less than. See, if I decrease the width, it now becomes smaller, right? The fact that I was able to do it is because I stored these in a variable and I know where these will be changed. So that's the main power of CSS variables, right? You don't have to just save widths, right? I can, let's say there is this box shadow that I like. Uh, that is 0 pixel, 0 pixels, 10 pixels, and RGBA. Uh, I can store this as well in a variable, and I can call it here. I could just say box shadow variable good shadow, but I don't want long variable, and that should apply shadow. It does have a shadow now. I hope you guys are able to see it. It's too small. Let me change this to 100. Now it's bigger, right? So you can store anything, almost any kind of data in a CSS variable, and it has a little more usages that I will explain that will get more clear in the demo. That's all right with you. Are there any questions on variables?
Yeah, we do have
I
questions
don't
coming
think
up.
so.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay, so next one from Abhijit we have height of variable, like he has used an expression lot here with the way can we add the
Mm,
height, like add pixels to the height if we are using a variable there? I mean, like height where standard height plus 100 pixels, will this
okay.
work?
It in this case it won't. Because that's not the syntax for adding. It could work though if we. I haven't tried this ever myself, but there is another CSS function called calc. It allows you to add or subtract things. If I save this, I'm not sure if it did work. So if you want to add something to it, you could using this calc. So this will be substituted by with whatever we had here, 300 pixels, and then an additional 100 pixels, and we're good. Does that answer your question?
I guess it does.
I forgot the name. Awesome.
So next we have is, do we have any browser compatibility issues when it comes to CSS variables?
There are, yes, I'm not sure on the specifics, but whatever we see here, most of it won't be supported by Internet Explorer. And if your company still uses Internet Explorer, haha, so I cannot help you. But I would suggest whenever you try to use any of these, that's actually a good question. Always look for compatibility. If you want a quick reference, there is this website called Can I Use? Just write Can I Use CSS Variables, and it will give you the answer. As you can see here, it is available on Edge. It's supported widely, not Internet Explorer, I'm afraid, or Opera Mini. If any of you still use Opera Mini, it's not available.
Okay, so next we have is it good to define all standard properties in a CSS constant files?
Okay. Constants were popularized by SAS. So don't mistake CSS variables with SAS variables. They are completely different. But we I don't think people usually do constants file, but yeah, it's a good practice to put it in a constants file. That way you have all your variables in one place. One more thing that I forgot to tell you is that CSS variables also cascade, right? If I here say, uh, no, not here. Let's say here, if I say, you know what? I don't like your std height. I want std height to be 600 pixels. You could do that. Now it's 600. It's scoped to the second div. So in second div, standard height will change its value to 600 pixels, but only to this. As you notice, it did not affect this div. It only affects the second one. So you can scope your variables if you want. So this is this is a neat trick to switch between your styles if you want.
I guess that answers the question. So next we have is, suppose we have several CSS files and we want a standard height and it to be used in all CSS files anyway. We can do this apart from writing the variables in all the files.
You don't need to write the variable in all the files. That's the point. So you just need to reference the variables in your. So let's say you, like someone pointed out, constants. You create a constants file and you reference that file in each of your web page. Like I said, CSS variables cascade, right? So more specific the CSS variable, it will be applied. And if you have all your variables in just one file, the specificity won't make a difference, right? So instead of writing it in each file, you write it in one file and you reference that file in all of your web pages.
Yes, that answers. And
Awesome.
we have only one question in the question section. Yeah, one more. While adding, what if units are different? Like declaration is its pixels, and while adding in vertical with
Okay.
width.
I see that calc is a hit with all of you guys. That's awesome. Calc is beautiful. It doesn't care whatever you provide. Let's say I change this to 10 VH. It would still work. Now it has different height, right? So when you use calc, you can provide any sort of units to it as long as they are length units, right? Be it percentage, be it pixels, be it points, be it VH, VW, whatever. So calc works with everything. It's actually a good tool to have if you are a front-end developer.
I guess we are done with CSS variable questions now.
Awesome. Thank you for your questions. Something that is very close to my heart is our next topic. It's transitions and
Animation.
animations. We are way out of time. You guys ask a lot of questions, which is a good thing. I'm not complaining. But so let's go. Let's do transitions. What are transitions? Right now, I don't see a point of this presentation. Okay, what are animations and transitions? So animations and transitions um, help your web page to stand out. Okay, so transitions, if you talk about transitions are something that allow you to smoothly go from one CSS style state to another. And similarly, animations are kind of configurations for transitions that use transitions, but add a lot of steps to them, and they can change multiple properties at once. What all of this means, I will try to explain in code yet again. So let's go. Okay. I'm done with this. Yes. So I'm gonna add a new file. So I'm sorry if there was a lot of noise. We have guests. So let's talk about transitions.html. Cool. I'm gonna add an HTML here. All right. So let's talk about transitions. Okay. So I hope this is saved and transitions. Yes. So let's say I have a box again. I will call it box, and it has nothing inside. I will add some style, and let's say box has a height of 100 pixels and a width of 100 pixels. All right. Cool. I hope. Oh, no background. Background color purple. Same. You have this box. It now seems a little too small. All right, cool. I hope you all can see box. So what I want to do with this box is that when I hover over it, when I get my mouse over it, I want it to change color, let's say. That's simple with CSS. Pseudo class, I could say background color should become red. Now, if you notice, when I hover over this, it changes color to red. Now, this is where transitions come in. You notice that the style is changing, the background color is changing from purple to red. I said transitions are something that smoothly help you transition from one CSS style state to another. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce transitions. I'm going to say, you know what, transition property, the property background color should transition. Okay, but that's not enough. I also have to specify how long it should be. So I would say transition duration. Say 1 second. Save this, you would notice that the color is changing to red, but now it is very smooth, really, really smooth. And that's what transitions really are. They allow you to transition from one style state to another smoothly. Let's get back to our box. What else? What I want to do is I also want it when we hover over it, I want it to have a border radius of 20 pixels. There's no border radius, right? Now, if you, for your the keen eye, you would notice that although the color is going smoothly, the border radius isn't. Because we never told it that also it also needs to transition the border radius. So I would just tell that, say that save, would notice that the border radius also transitions smoothly, which is very nice. Similarly, there are a lot of more things we can do. There is something called transition delay. That delays a transition if you want. Let's say I want to delay it by 1 second. When I hover over it, it takes a second, then and only then it transitions from one state to another, which is a good thing to have. And we have a transition timing function. Timing function, which can be a lot of things. So what is a transition timing function? It just tells it uh, how to enter the transition and how to leave it, as in the timing, right? So by default it's linear, the transition timing function. That means it will go from red to purple or purple to red in a linear fashion. And ease out, it would start fast and end slow. There are a lot of transition timing functions available, some cubic, some square, and things like that. Cool. So if I save now, save this and go here, since we have a delay, uh, it's not very visible, but there is a kind of a difference with transition timing function. You can have different durations for different ones. Let's say I want my background color to change immediately, but my border radius to change after 1 second. We can have that. See, the border radius takes 1 second to change, things similar to that. Now, how is it important? How does it matter? Why do I need transition other than it looks good? It's good UX to have transitions. Okay. So let's say I'm building a button, which is not a button, which is a div that says click me. And I give it this a class of button. Now when I save this, not yet, say I want it to have a bit of fit content, a padding of from top and bottom it should be 10 pixels, from left and right it should be 20 pixels. This is just basic CSS, and its background color should be red and color should be white. Save. Now this is a button. Okay, it doesn't give anything. When I click it, it doesn't give me a feeling that it's been clicked. So that's where it comes in. That's where your transitions come in, right? I can tell the button to say on hover, your background color should change to purple. Let's say purple, and let's save this. Changes to purple, right? I could give it a transition. Not transition kind of function. Now the shorthand for transition is this. What property, how much time, and what should be your timing function. Okay, so we save this. Notice it has some things, but what I really wanted to give, I want the user to give them a feeling that when they click the button, something is happening. So I want the background color to change back to red. And if I save this, see, when I click this, something's happening and user is getting a feeling that it's changing without it being too abrupt. So that's just one place where you could use transitions, right? Basically, we used mostly these pseudo classes to give it that effect, but transitions help. So that's the point that I was trying to make. Are we good so far? Cool. I want to now do a quick animation one. If you have any questions on transitions, please shoot those out. If you don't, that's also fine. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a ball. Now we're going towards animations. Okay. So there is not much to be covered in transitions other than that, but there is a lot more to be learned by practice. So please practice on that. Now let's say I have a ball. That is nothing. How do you create a ball in CSS? Does anyone know? To create a ball in CSS, let's say I have a height of 100 pixels and a width of 100 pixels and a background of red. Okay, save. That creates a box, not a ball. And I have a border radius of exactly half of the height or and the width. So in this case, would be 50 pixels. And there you have a ball. It's really easy to create a ball in CSS. So what I want to do is I want to create a bouncing effect on this ball. Okay. How do I do that? For that, I want to create an animation. What is an animation? So animation is something that tells an element to which it's applied what its state should be at different points in time. So by that I mean this is so the keyword that we use to create an animation is keyframes. Then the name of the animation, in this case bounce, and I want to tell it, you know what, at from, that means from this state, transform and state y 500 pixels to what I'm telling it there is, so by the way, this transform is another CSS property that moves an element from one position to another. So what we're telling it is that from your y, from your mean position, move in the y-axis by 500 pixels. That's all I'm telling. Now, how do I apply this to this ball? I tell it that, hey, animation name, bounce, and animation iteration count, infinite, and animation duration, 2 seconds. You would notice that this ball is going from top to bottom, right? If you're feeling that it's being cut, it's my browser, it's acting up today. But this is not bouncing. The problem why it's not bouncing, because I just have the initial state and the final state. I don't have the intermediate state, right? Let me change that. There's something else we can say. We can say 0% of the time it should do this, and then at the 50% of the time it should do. At the 50% when it reaches the time interval, which was 2 seconds, it should do this, and then at when it reaches 100%, it should go back to its mean position, to this position. Save this. You would notice that the ball is now bouncing. Now let me break it down again. So what we told this element is that you should apply this animation to this ball, this bounce that we just defined here. It should iterate, it should happen infinite number of times. If I change this to 2 times, you will notice that it happens once, twice, and that's it. So when I said infinite, I told it I do it a lot of times. This duration tells it how long should the animation last. I could change this to 1 second and it would bounce faster. Notice, right? So that's animations. Those are animations for you. You could do a lot of things. I said you could change multiple properties, right? I could tell it that its background color should be red, and then it should change to blue, and then again to red. Save this. You would notice that it's changing to blue. Then 1 second is too much. Okay. You notice that it's. Okay, I really want to open this in Chrome now. Another case to use Chrome. Notice this is much smoother, right? So it's changing both the properties now, and I could do a lot more things with it, right? I could really do a lot more things with it. But these are animations in general. Now another question: why are they important, right? When will I ever need to do this? You won't. Maybe you won't. But animations help in solving some problems, right? Let's say I want to create a loading spinner, right? You could create a spinning animation, for example. Let's quickly do that, right? Let's create another loader, and its height and width should be 100 pixels. Its border box sizing should be border box, and its border should be 4 pixels, red, solid, 4, red, and I'm trying to explain when they will ever be useful. Okay. So then I would create a border, say this, now it did nothing. And I could convert this into, I could write another animation here. I could call it spin, and I could simply use it from into from transform there is another transform called rotate 0 degrees to 360 degrees, and I just need to apply this one now. I need to tell this about this animation name, spin, animation duration 2 second, and animation count and final. So that now this is a loading spinner, if you see. It's just that it's not that great. So you could create, I hope this is visible. If it's not, change this to white. Now it is, I guess. Right? So you could yourself create these animations and which are really useful. There is actual application to these animations. I hope that was helpful. That's all we have on animations. Any questions? Awesome. We have no questions. Cool. All right.
I think we do have a question.
We do.
Yes, it looks like animations do all the things that transition can do, is it?
Animation can do all things. Actually, no. So transition usually works on state change, right? Transitions usually work on user action. When user does something, okay, to change the state of something. Like in previous example, we put it on hover and we put it on active. But animations, on the other hand, can be applied directly, right? We are not doing anything to the spinner, but we just told it that, hey, there is an animation, you need to apply that animation to yourself. So animations and transitions have, although they use the same principle to go from one CSS state to another, their applications are completely different. Hope that answers the question.
Another we have is what if pixels we provide in keyframes are out of the range?
What does that mean? Are you saying these pixels, the 500 pixels, it will keep bouncing to that position? So it's more of a property for transform to manage. So let's say I change this to, let's say, 2000, and I bring back my ball. Where was it? Hmm, it will start bouncing out of range, as you can notice. So it's really up to you. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, we do not have any more questions on animations.
Awesome.
We can move ahead.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. I know we are not doing a lot of justice to these topics, but then again, like I said, the point of us being here today is to give you a taste of what is possible in CSS and what you can actually do with CSS. So I hope that helps. Cool. So we are almost done with all the topics except one. So like I said, we want to really put all of this into practice. So I was hoping that we could build something that helps us do that. All right. So in the next, I don't know how many minutes this is going to take. So we will try to put all of this, what we learned today, into practice and build a small portfolio website, a web page rather, and see the power of CSS in practice. So I will just jump into that. Okay. So let's create a new file here. Folio.html. Right. And for this to work, I will have to move this to the whole. I will keep switching between the browser and this. That's fine. And a quick disclaimer on what we are going to build. Let me give you a quick glimpse of what we are going to build. I built this last night. I'm going to build this website. What do you have here? We're going to build this in really fast because we now know all the CSS there is to know to build this. So the point that I'm trying to make with this demo is that once you know CSS, once you know your CSS, it's really easy to build things, right? You don't need to write a lot of code to get something done. You just need to write the right code to get it done. Okay, so let's get rid of that. And let's go to portfolio because this ball won't stop bouncing. And now it did stop bouncing. Cool. So to build that site, what we need four different things. First, we need a container, and then we need a header. We need a side. I'm gonna call it left sidebar. Then we need right sidebar, and then we need for this we need the main content, and then we need the footer. Okay, so if you notice, so what I want to do, I want to create a header, I want to create an aside, a left sidebar, a right sidebar, the main content, and then the footer. This is where grid comes in. You remember grid, guys? I hope you still remember grid. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna quickly give all of these some let's say some text. Side, main, right side, and footer. I want to use grid to get all of these. Right now there is nothing to get all of these onto this page. So first of all, I want to make sure that my container works. So what I want to do is I want to give my container a width of 100 VW, a height of 100 VH. Cool so far, I hope. And then what I want to do is I want to give it a margin of auto. I say margin auto since it no, so width I will keep 80. Since it does not have 100% width, it will move it to the center. It will keep 10 VH here and 10 VH here. Rest of it will keep in the center. And one more thing, I want to make sure that margin is 0. Otherwise, your page goes out of bounds. Cool. Now, I want to make this a grid and I want to place these items correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say display grid, and now I want to start placing. What I want is I want 4 rows and I want I want 3 rows, one for header, one for left side now main and right side, and one for footer. So if you remember from last time, we could do that using grid template rows, then the height of the rows. I want the header to be 40 pixels, the rest of it, and the footer to be, let's say, 20 pixels, and take the rest of the whatever is available. For that, there is this keyword FR. Whatever fraction of the space is available, when I say 1, I say take the whole space, whatever is available. So I got the rows finalized. Now the problem is that I need the columns. What I want is, I want the, okay, say grid template columns. I want it to be the left side now I want to have at least 200 pixels. The middle one I want 1 FR and the right I want 200 pixels. Cool. I save this. You will notice that I'm done. It is ready. The only problem that I see is the footer is not in the right place. None of these are in the right place. Problem is that header should occupy the whole top. The left side should be here, right side should be here, and footer should be at the bottom, which is not happening. In order to accommodate that, like I said last time, that in grid there is something I didn't tell you. So grid template areas. Now, this is a property that makes your life so much easier. What I'm telling it is, I get to name my areas. What I'm telling is that, you know what, first column that you have, first grid block that you have should have header. Second one should also have header, and third one should also have header. And then when you go to the next row, it should have left side, then it should have main, and then it should have right side. And then in the bottom, everything should be footer. I'm telling it, I have 9 columns and I'm total 9 boxes, right? Because I have 3 rows and 3 columns. I'm telling it the first row should be occupied by header. The second row, first box left side now, second should be main, and third should be right side, and the bottom should be all occupied by footer. That's the point that I'm trying to make here. The only problem is that how does it know which is header? It doesn't take this. So I have to go ahead and let it know what header is. So I will tell it, say header, its grid area is header. It's called header. Okay. Similarly, I will have to do for 4. I will tell it footer's grid area name is footer, and then main is F5. Main is main, and then left sidebar, sidebar, and right sidebar is right sidebar. I do that. Save this. There's still a problem. What did I call it? I called it right side, not bar. Save this. Yeah, now everything is fine. It doesn't seem like it's fine, but it is. This is header. This is the left side. If I inspect this, you would notice. That that is correct. See, our grid is perfectly divided. We have the header, we have the left side, we have right side, and we have main. So this is where grid comes in handy, right? Does it make sense to you guys? I hope it does. It makes a lot of sense to me. Cool. Now I want to quickly build the header. Okay, so I want in the header, I want my navigation to be there. So since we are almost out of time, we are actually out of time, I'm going to borrow some code, the structure that is at least. And so let's see. Cool. And if I come here, I want my header to not have this, but it should have home, about, portfolio, contributions, and testimonials. And this header should be a, remember Flex, guys? We have Flex. Notice now I have beautiful this, and I also don't like this font one bit. So I'm going to change the font. To do that, I will again borrow a font. You can get fonts at, so this is the font that I downloaded, that I'm referencing from Google Fonts. And now I have to tell my container or body that my font family is Roboto Mono, and a fallback font is Arial and Helvetica and Sans Serif. Save this, and my font is much better. Now, you guys remember how Flex is helpful, right? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say, you know what? Justify content to center, and it's at center. Still don't like it. Whatever is inside header and should have a display of inline block. It should have a padding of 10 pixels and 20 pixels. Oh, much better, right? And and I also wanted to have some on. I also want it on hover to do something for me so that I can really understand that it is good. I that I have actually hovered over it. I want it to have a background color of, let us say, what do I like? Borrow a color of uh, say this color. I want it to have border radius of cells and box sizing of border box. If you notice that it is very ugly, its height should be very good size. And its color should be white. And much better, right? Yeah, right. Now, if you guys remember, we talked transitions, right? So we could use transition here. Right? We could make sure that it transitions properly from one to another form. So I could say that transition on background color should be 200 milliseconds and freeze out background color as well as good. And I should have the same thing for color. Now you see it's much better. And I want each of these spans to have a margin of 0 and 3. Now they are, you know, focus. So now they are well wide of each other, right? So we built a top navigation really fast and really well. So I hope that helped you understand that Flex can be helpful, right? So this was all possible because of Flex. We could do a lot of things to this, a lot of things, right? Really lot of things, right? But we don't have the time for that. Need to increase the height of it. Looks okay, much better, right? I'm not looking at the chat right now, guys, but if you have, if there are questions, Ankita, just let me know.
Not yet. No questions.
Okay, awesome, cool. So we're done with the top nav, which is a good thing because now we need to build the rest of it, right? The left side, the right side, and the footer, which we will really quickly. So don't worry about that. One more thing we could do is that whenever there is a clickable link, it's usually preferred that your cursor should be a pointer. So when I go here, if it's a pointer, it tells me that this link can be clicked, which is in fact a very good thing to have. Going further, now in the left side now, what I want my introduction. Okay, I want to introduce myself to people. For that, I have an image and some text below the image. Okay, so let me grab this image real quick from my other open window. Now, this is a programmer image, it's not much. Cool. And below that image, I want some text to also say something. So for that text, let me grab some text also, like save this. I actually want to show you something. Let's save this. You will notice that even though I specified my left side to be some pixels, it it became not that, right? It took a lot of width. That's because of this image. That has nothing to do with that. All I need to do is make sure that I keep this image the right size. So all I will do is I will tell my left sidebar that uh, that the image that's inside it should have a width of 100%. Now it's much better, right? Hope it is for you guys too. And one more thing that I would like to bring your attention to is that I can I want this text and this image to be at the center here, right? Guys, remember Flex, right? We could get that done using Flex. So what I want to do is I want this left sidebar to be a display Flex, and it should have a Flex direction of column, and it should justify content center. Notice that now it's right flush at the middle. I also want these to be in the same uh, on the same line. So for that, I will use align item center. If you see now, which did not help for some reason. Oh, because they are centered. I am just not seeing it. So they are centrally aligned. It's just that this text doesn't go completely there. So I could fix that real quick. Could say that L text align center here, and it's central. So a left now is done. This is it. I also want to write some more text there. For example, let me just introduce some more text so that it looks really good. And there we have a little bit more, a little better looking things. Only thing is that I don't like it much yet. I don't like this just to align item center at all. And I want all of these hearts to be red. So since I already have a class, let me just say color red. Notice now it's much better, but I also want some spacing between these. Uh, that's easy to do if you don't want to use flex or anything. I could do this here in the left sidebar. Then I said justify content center. I could say space between, and they would have some space, but that's too much. I could say space around, and that's still a little too much. If it doesn't fit your criteria, what you want here, you could go the uh, old way, right? You could say, you know what, that sidebar, whatever is inside, whatever is child, this is a way of selecting the flex items. I want it to have a margin of top and bottom of 20 pixels and 0 from left and right. And that fixes it. want it to be central. Now I have my sidebar, which is working perfectly, and I don't like this. So my left sidebar is done. I have introduced myself. I have told people what I like. Now I want to have my content here, the main content that I want to add to this little portfolio website that I'm creating. Now my main content will be some of the blogs that I have written, since I don't have time to write all of that. I will again borrow some code. Mind you, this is just structure. This is just structure of the code. This has nothing to do with CSS. This is just, I'm borrowing some HTML, as you can see here, and which looks very bad, right? We could do a lot of things to fix this. For example, first thing that we need to do is that there is no padding on this, and we really should be introducing padding. So let's introduce a little bit of padding on the main. Okay, so let's say padding of 40 pixels. Enough. Looks much better, right? Another thing that I want to fix is that I want each of these. So what I added is that I added these articles. So I want each of these articles to have some pad margin from top and bottom between each other. So to add that margin, I could just say, this is my main content, right? I could say within my main content, look for articles, and each article should have a margin from only top and bottom of 30 pixels, no, 20 pixels, and nothing from left and right. Now, it looks so much better. What I also want is that I want these H1 to have some, this H2 probably, this H3 probably to have some padding from top and bottom, which I can add as and how I want. The point that I want to introduce here though is that to add a little more UX, you could use a little more CSS, right? What I want to do is when I hover over this, when I hover over an article, first my cursor should change because this is a clickable link. When I click it, some sort of article should open. So what I want is when I hover over this, this heading should be highlighted or it should change color somehow. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, you know what, this main article, when I hover over the article, whatever H2 is inside it, it should change its color. So whatever color we used for spam, this one. And you would notice that when I hover over these, mind you, I'm not hovering over the H2, I'm hovering over the whole article and the H2 is highlighted. This is the power of CSS. I can say if a parent is hovered upon, I can change the style of its children. This is, by the way, the find selector. When you put a space, it looks for whatever article is inside main. And when I put another space, it looks for whatever H2 is inside article. And it changes its color. One more thing you could say we could add here is that we could say that H2 should have a transition so that it looks good. You notice now when I go over these transition very nicely, very beautifully. And one more thing that I should probably add to this article is that cursor pointer that I told about earlier. But since it's a clickable link, I should be able to click this like that, right? Another thing that I think some of you might have noticed is that our container is now overflowing for some reason, right? But we put, if you remember, in our main grid, we said its height should not exceed 100 VH and our row should not exceed whatever. So this is a common thing in grid. So grid has this tendency to allow to expand as its content expands. So we could say here min height 0. We say that didn't help, by the way. So there are ways to fix it to make sure that your grid, which I'm going to borrow obviously because I did have this problem yesterday. Yeah, cool. So when I say main 0, I could also say overflow. Y scroll. Now it's scroll. Cool. We're going to fix the scroll bar, by the way. Scrollable so that our page still remains the crisp 100 VH that we started off with. Does that make sense? Hope it does. One more thing that since our main is now done, we're going to add some cosmetics to it going in the next 10 minutes, but I just want to finish the right side too. So in the right side, I want to display all the comments or the recent comments that came in, which is simple to do. What I need to do is I will again go ahead and borrow some code from the right sidebar. I will go here, I had a right sidebar and I would say, you know what, just give me some articles. Now I have some recent comments here. You can see I want, although I want these to have some better padding and all, so I could do that. I could say here where I have written for the right sidebar, I could say, you know what, right side, whatever articles inside right sidebar should have a margin of 10 pixels from top and bottom, 0 from left and right. Also right sidebar should have padding of padding left off pixels. And that makes it much better, as you can see. So we have finished even our comments and our page is almost done. But if you notice that we kind of revised our flex here and here, we revised our grid when we built our layout. Thing that we didn't revise was our transit. Revised our transitions. We couldn't revise our animations, or we couldn't revise. We couldn't revise our animations or CSS variables. But that's what I'm trying to come to. See, this page would look so much better if we somehow could add a dark theme to it, right? So how do you add a dark theme? It's gonna be difficult because when your pages grow, adding you will have to go ahead and change color and everything everywhere, right? What I will do is I will introduce us to variables. I would say root. I would say foreground should be red. Sorry, foreground. Let me borrow some foreground and background colors quickly. All right. So let's get rid of. One thing is that background should be this color and foreground should be this color. And when the theme is when I have in this scope, I should be reversed. But how do I apply these styles? So what I'm saying is that I need to use these background and foreground somewhere. So I will use them in body real quickly. I will say background color should be background and foreground color sorry, not foreground color. Color should be foreground, right? When I save this shouldn't change anything because, oh, it did completely change my everything. So what this means is that now what I said the background should be black and foreground should be white. And when we come here, we see that the theme is automatically applied to our web page. The reason it was applied to our web page is because we now have directly referenced this in our body, and body applies it to applies it everywhere, wherever we see it. One thing where these now come in handy is that if I go to my body and I say that, you know what, your class should be light, it now takes the scope of these variable scope changes, right? So now it's light again. So scoping of variables, like I said last time, while we were understanding variables, is important. So although root says background and foreground to be black and white, when I add the scope of light class, it says that no, they should be reversed. That's what's happening here. That's what this addition of this class, that's how it changed our UI from dark to black. We can quickly, let's finish our footer first. Okay, I'm gonna again borrow some code for the footer and say, and you see this at the bottom, made with love, attachment friends. Only problem with it is that it should be centrally aligned. And there it is. It's now centrally aligned and it looks good. All right. So one more thing I want to add is I want a button here. I want a button here that helps me switch the theme. Okay, so for that reason, I may have to use a little bit of JavaScript. So I'm going to use a very, very little JavaScript here. I'm not here. And JavaScript is very small and little. It just attach itself to this, attach itself to two buttons which I haven't added for some reason. Those two buttons I will add now. Let's add two more buttons to this, to our top. Cool. What I've done is I have added this button here, and this button is just adding or removing that light class to our body that we were doing manually. And when I click this, you would notice that now our theme is switching to dark and it's switching back to white and all. The reason it's possible, the reason this was made possible is by using variables. This wouldn't have been possible without variables. If we would have directly used background and foreground color, we won't be able to change this theme directly. It took just two variables for us to get this done. This is how simple it is. I hope that was helpful. One more thing that I don't like about this page is this scroll bar, right? It's so bad. CSS allows you to change your scroll bars as well. I don't know whether you guys know it, but it does. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create a new better scroll bar real quick. Here for scroll bar, you need to use a WebKit, and WebKit is fairly simple to use. I will be sharing a link of our GitHub to this repo. Just don't have enough time to explain what these mean. I'm just saying that scroll bar should be 6 pixels wide, it should have a border radius of 3 pixels, and its background should be this color. That's all I'm saying. And you will notice that now our scroll bar looks much better, right? I hope all of you are seeing right. And we are almost done. we just didn't touch animations. What I want is that this heart should have a pulsating animation, right? I don't know whether you guys will be able to tell, but I have created a pulsating animation, which I will be applying. Let me copy that over. So the animation that I have created is simple. It is it changes the font size from 0.9 rem to 0.8 rem. I'm going to add this here. Animation name pulse, animation iteration count, infinite, and animation. What else do we need? Duration. I'm not sure if you guys are able to tell, but now we have this pulsating heart. So it kind of looks cool. I'm not sure if you guys find it cool, but it does. Within what I'm not sure how long we did, but within 30-40 minutes, we were able to create a complete portfolio page. Although it has dummy data, but it has a nav bar, it has two sidebars, and it has a layout. It has animations, transitions, everything. And I really hope you guys. It was really simple to create. We didn't add a lot of CSS. Let me check how much CSS we added. We added a total of from 11 to around 110 lines of CSS. That's fantastic. In 110 lines of CSS, we were able to create something that is a little complicated, but in the meantime, it looks kind of good. Cool. I think that's almost it. I do have one more slide to go, uh, which is current state of CSS. I think so. The current state of CSS that I wanted to talk about was, since we're out of time, but I will still just take 5 minutes. CSS in JS. So you guys might have seen when we write the React or code or something, we use JavaScript, CSS in JavaScript, right? Where our properties are camel cased. Everything applies, right? I write CSS in JS every day, but I'm still able to use keyframes. I'm still able to use transitions. I'm still able to use all types of selectors, class selector. So don't let that that make you believe that when you write CSS in JS or something, it's still not. We cannot do all things CSS. We can still do all things CSS. It's just that the syntaxes will be different, but all of these items are always available there. And SAS is something that's close to my heart that I really want to do another webinar on. Maybe we could pick all these items up because when you write CSS in JS, it usually follows the syntax of SAS. So hopefully soon we will be able to do that. And thank you. Thanks a lot for bearing with me for a lot of time.
I guess now we can take all the questions. Please explain line number 15 where you have put margin 0. What is that? I think he's talking about the asterisk symbol.
Oh, okay. So browsers have this habit of, oh, this one. So browsers have this habit of adding the default margin to some items, right? Your paragraphs have their own margin, your whole page, the body has its margin. That makes your item shift a little and your calculations can go off. When you say star, asterisk, it means whatever is there on the page, please set its margin to 0. So this is a common trick that is used in front end that helps you get over those browser defaults.
Okay. And probably the last question we have is again the question Ayub asked. Faisal, can you explain when shall we use flex and when grid, since both can be used for the same purpose? If you can explain with an example or something.
Uh, as we did in the demo, we used both Flex and CSS. So we used Flex more like in internal elements, right? We used Flex in, let me see if I can bring that up again. Okay, here it is. So we used Grid on the overall page, and then we used Flex for the side nav, the top nav, right? So Flex is more used to when you are building internal items. Although I could have built all this in Flex, right? But Grid helped me in building it really fast. So they can be used together, not always interchangeably, but together. Grid to do its job and Flex its own.
What difference will it make? A separate style sheet and style in the file itself.
Okay, it doesn't make much difference when you talk about application of the style in itself. It won't affect CSS at all. The only thing that it does affect is you have see our if you look at our file, it got out of control, right? It's too big. So keeping your styles separate helps. And another thing where it will help is that I cannot apply these styles to any other page now because they are in this page only. So if I put these in a separate style sheet, then I can import that style sheet in other pages as well. So that could help. The only reason I did it this way because I just didn't have enough space for two files and I thought that I would do one file only.
So basically, it helps with the reusability, right?
Yes,
Okay, so any more questions, please?
I think we are
Yeah,
good.
I guess so. So, thank you, Faisal. Thank you very much. It was a great, great session.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And I hope the audience
Okay.
enjoyed it equally. Like, at least I enjoy it a lot when these speakers demonstrate, give demonstrations. Then, like, it really helps to understand any topic in a better way. And like, you always do that, and it is always like very like understanding. Like, we can easily.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so and I would like to thank the audience as well. Like we really had great audience today, and like we liked all the questions that you asked. Some of the questions were very intriguing. So thank you so much, everyone. And again, I would like to request you guys to share your feedback with us, and I'm sharing the link over here. I've already shared our YouTube channels link and all our community links on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and also Faisal's LinkedIn profile link, his blogs. So if you want to directly connect with him, you can like send a request, and then my and our community initiatives heads profile link as well, Sana Channel's link as well. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope we
Hey, thanks a lot, guys.
on
Yeah.
all the community
Thanks a lot.
sessions. Thank you so much, Faisal.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys, for listening in. I know I went just 1 hour over time. I really
I
forgot
think it
about
was
that.
great
But
because just when you left, when your internet was down, like we all were really like unhappy.
oh, oh, that's good to hear. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
So
Thanks for
this brings
listening.
us to the end of the session. Thank you so much, everyone. Good day.